Tolkien has been my favorite author since I read The Hobbit 40 years ago. Let's have a look at different editions of Tolkien's books that I came across with during this time. This is the 100th anniversary edition that I bought in 1992 as I was a student. I'm beginning with this because it's my all-time best edition. There's Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the Silmarillion published by Grafton. First, the cover illustrations by John Howe are absolutely gorgeous. In my opinion, this is one of the most talented Tolkien illustrators. The golden inserts with runic inscriptions make them look even more beautiful. These are written in Ungerthas, a runic alphabet, and they mean the Lord of the Rings translated from the Red Book. This edition has several pages dedicated to the map of Middle-earth, broken by regions. It also includes a rather extensive set of annexes. But what makes it really dear to me is its paper. I believe paper look and feel are way more important than anything else in a book's features. To me, printing really determines reading experience, even more than the binding type, whether it's a hardcover or paperback. It's not the cover that you'll look at and touch the most while reading. It's the pages themselves, and therefore, the way the ink appears on paper, the size of the characters, the fonts used, the feel of the pages are the most important criteria, whereas the rest, an extra. This edition has it all, the primordial and the extra features. That's why it's perfect for me. So, what about its paper? It has the ideal texture and color. It's a good quality cream paper, yellowish enough, and printed in bold. In general, cream fits better for fiction books, as it looks more literary and traditional. It's also softer and easier on the eyes, as opposed to white paper, which makes a very bright background. White is most suitable for nonfiction or for books that contain color images. That's in general, but in the specific case of Tolkien books, I really think it makes even more sense to use this kind of paper. To explain why, let's plunge deeper into Tolkien's way of writing. Tolkien's World is all about ancient things. That doesn't mean that it's not the only one, but that it does something others don't necessarily do. It glorifies the ancient. It's deeply melancholic about the lost past. There's a difference between using a medieval world as a mere setting for your story and actually making it the essence and the meaning of your story. It's very important to understand that contrary to many authors, Tolkien has not created an imaginary world that could fit into a few books. Rather, he has written books to give the reader a glimpse of the world he had created, and which extends far beyond those books. In other words, the universe Tolkien created is so vast and rich that it could have been possible to write many other books based on this without having to invent further details. They are all here already. One just needs to get a closer look on some aspect of it, for instance, a place or a character, and the story writes itself without effort. Why? Because all components of this universe are solidly linked together, and everything makes sense. There's no addition made without purpose, as could be the case just because of some author's fancy. There's nothing superfluous, nothing that cannot be explained by the world's logic, nothing that stands alone. Magic is commonly used by authors to feature things that could not be explained otherwise. It's very convenient. Magic is the author's justification to set up anything he wants in his fantasy world. Tolkien's world doesn't work like this. If magic is present, it's just another layer on top of something that already exists, and for good reasons, and not just because. Most of Tolkien's work was about creating the world, rather than writing a story based on it. It's important to remember that Tolkien was a philologist who studied the history of languages and then created his own. Not just an alphabet, but whole new languages with their own grammar and vocabulary. Something that could actually be learned, written, and spoken just like any real language. He also created a detailed genesis of his world that laid the basis for future stories. The many lays of the Book of Lost Tales or the Silmarillion constitute the Bible, the mythology, the legends that all the rest is based upon. During decades, Tolkien thus crafted a consistent, logical universe based on his mythology and languages. Only then were written the well-known stories of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which are just windows on this extremely rich world. When we read them, we have the feeling that we get a glimpse of something much bigger than the story itself. That is what makes these books so magnificent. Many fiction books are well written and entertaining, but few produce such an overwhelming impression of visiting a real parallel universe. That's it for the parenthesis. Now let's have a look on some other interesting releases. This later edition, by HarperCollins, provides similar features, but with a slightly whiter paper and lighter fonts. Its cover jacket shows illustrations by Tolkien himself, which in my opinion is a tremendous advantage. Indeed, who could better illustrate the story than its author? Overall, this very classic edition is also very good. In fact, just as good as the previous one, if it weren't for the sentimental value of the first that I read in English. By the same publisher, this time an all-in-one edition. This one requires very thin pages, which is a con, but on the pro side, you can go around with the entire book series in your pocket, provided you have jumbo-sized pockets. Again, cover illustration by J.R.R. Tolkien. Very efficient gold on red setting. It has the same information in annex than the previous editions. The maps are better printed on the inside of the jacket. And finally, a few international, old book editions in French and Russian, the other languages that I speak. The Hobbit in French provides these funny illustrations and a rather good translation. This edition of The Lord of the Rings featured interesting cover illustrations. But the French translation is far from perfect, and it's a pity. It also has a great sentimental value for me. This is one of the only hardcover editions that I have. I usually prefer paperbacks. They are much easier to handle, although they tend to deteriorate more quickly. The Unfinished Tales also had great cover illustrations. One of them was my model for a drawing. Just like was the cover of the Middle-earth role-playing game. The Hobbit in Russian had a few memorable illustrations. Some adequate, others less. Bilbo himself is particularly good looking. As for Gollum, I let you judge. Tolkien books are really fascinating, and collectors around the world are many. I collect only books, but I can understand others are also interested in figurines and stuff like that. To me, the book is the real thing. So simple and so complex at the same time. So let's enjoy these. Thank you for watching, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts and comments.